consider me rattled when I saw this.
I'm just so shocked that somebody could get away with potentially ripping off someone else's recipe for such a long time, especially publishing it in a hugely popular recipe book, and making millions of dollars off of it.
Sally's baking addiction backed Nagi up and also claimed that Brooke has plagiarized one of her recipes too.
I'm really surprised that no one, either from the publisher or from her own team, took the time to get some PR advice on how they should have handled this.
So Nagi is easily Australia's most popular cook. She's far and away, there's her and there's daylight. She released her first book last year, RecipeTin Eats, and when I say it sold, it was the fastest selling non-fiction book in Australia ever. It beat everything else you want to throw at me. And it's gone on to sell 350,000 copies, which means that's somewhere in the order of $17 or $18 million worth of books. She is an enormous success. Now, into that space comes Brooki, whose real name is Brooke Bellamy. Brooki launched her cookie business and it went crazy online. She is a viral sensation.
Today, I'm going to share with you the cookie recipe that broke the internet.
And I think what happened was the publishers came to her and said, you should write a book because you can make a lot of money. If you write a book, your fans are really going to want a book. And so she put all these recipes together. She released her book and it sold pretty well. About 90,000 copies, somewhere in that order, have been sold. Nagi had a fan who noticed that one or two of the recipes in Brooki's book were very similar to her own. And she did go to Brooki directly and to Brooki's publisher and say, I think I've been plagiarised and what are you going to do about it? And she wasn't happy with the response she got. So she put the feud on Instagram and it went off like, what pun could we use?
It's a very spicy story.
Exactly. The oven mitts were absolutely off.
The caramel slice recipe and the baklava recipes were nearly word for word.
Look, I did a bit of a search just this morning for baklava recipes and I thought, comparisons, there's probably a lot of recipes that are very similar in terms of instructions and ingredients. And, the variations were quite extraordinary. And I tried to narrow down the field and it's really, there are so many variations in A, the ingredients, B, the quantities, and C, the instructions for baklava recipes, that when you're getting down to things like 175 mils of this and, the number of sheets of phyllo that you need and the number of strips that you need to cut it into, I just thought there's an enormous coincidence there, shall we say. And so that did make me wonder how you could end up with two recipes that were really much more similar than any other baklava recipes I was able to find.
Yes, I made the baklava this morning. I made RecipeTin Eats baklava with my little girl and I got her to read out the ingredients for me. And we had both recipes side by side and they are absolutely identical, down to the formatting of the paragraphs, the instructions of what to do with the pastry. One of the debates that's arisen out of the Rumble is whether or not it's possible to own a recipe or whether recipes are part of our collective cultural knowledge. Personally, I think it is absolutely possible, and I think the fact that that is even questioned suggests that we don't really value women's work or women's intellectual property. This is considered a feminine domain, baking.
Well, I think that's incredibly astute. I think you've absolutely nailed it there, that people were not taking seriously something that is extremely serious because this is big business. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars generated by two female entrepreneurs. And it also peeled back some layers, if you will, on the book industry because cookbooks are far and away the most successful books in Australia. Like without the cookbook industry, many publishers quite simply would collapse. And that, I think, was the bit that was not being taken seriously, how big these businesses are. Now, in terms of whether or not you can copyright a recipe, the intellectual property lawyers say you can't. They say that a recipe isn't individual enough and you haven't put enough of your own creativity into it in order for it to attract any copyright protection. Plagiarism is not in itself a crime. You can't be sued for plagiarism. It's not a criminal offence. There are no fines attached to doing it. Traditionally in journalism, it's been a moral thing, an ethical thing, that you shouldn't plagiarise other people's work. And no one is saying, oh, well, I'm not saying anyway, whether someone did or didn't in this particular case. But it's interesting to me that creative work, as you say, because it's by women perhaps, attracts no protection in law.
Now, there have been real-life consequences, Caroline. What's happened?
There have been two. So both Brooki and Nagi were nominated for Book of the Year at the Australian Book Industry Awards, and Nagi won it by a country mile. I was interested to see that they were both nominated in the same category. What would have happened if Brooki had won? That would have been very controversial, I think. Nagi has said that she just wants to go back to baking. She's had enough. She doesn't want to talk about it anymore, and she has pleaded with people to please stop trolling Brooki.
Please stop the trolling. Now, I know I've made serious allegations, but this does not justify the personal attacks that I've seen online against Brooke Bellamy. I do not support it, and I'm asking you to stop.
Brooki is, as we know, 4 months pregnant and under a lot of stress because she's been the subject of these allegations, and she has lost already an ambassadorship that she had with the Queensland government, although I'm not entirely convinced that those two things are really closely related. That might have been about to run out anyway. But there are real-life consequences for anybody who gets involved in an internet pile-on. People do tend to forget that these are women, real people, on the other side of your keyboard warriorship, and it can be intensely painful to be accused of something that you feel that you have not done.